what you intend to do is you land at Nuuk Airport and you seize the airport. You take Air Force combat controllers, right? These are the guys that seize runways for us, and they will take control of the airport and then raise the American flag over it and declare that the capital of Nuuk is the United States. Now that sounds easy. It's the sort of thing that someone who would not care about the impact globally on the United States or even locally, because I mean, what are you going to do when you land forces in that city? Fight the police? Shoot the soldiers or capture the Danish soldiers at Arctic Command? I'm going to go find these questions out because the Danes are too polite to discuss this.
Hello and welcome to the Trump Report. I'm Louis Sykes. Today we're joined by Malcolm Nance, intelligence and foreign policy analyst and a former cryptologic intelligence officer in the US Navy. Malcolm also fought for Ukraine in the 2022 Russian invasion. Malcolm, thank you very much for joining me today.
Always fun to be on Times Radio.
Well, it's always fun to have you. Trump has once again said he won't rule out using military force to take Greenland. What do you make of those comments and the trajectory and his insistence on this policy?
It's funny you should mention this because I had been planning to go to Greenland for some time. I may have mentioned it last time we spoke. And I'm on my way tomorrow, where I'll be first in Copenhagen, then in Nuuk, the capital. And I'll be traveling around the country to all the major airports, towns. There's no cities. Nuuk is the only city, about 18,000 people and a few dozen cars, I guess. But most of the population of 57,000 people who live in Greenland are situated on the southwest side, where it's relatively green in the summer and it's icy cold every other time. I mean, it's still winter there. 0 degrees Celsius was the high today in the capital. And in every other part in the north, it is much colder. So for when you look at the size, the geographic scope of Greenland, going all the way from the south in Katortok, all the way to the north up near Patufik Space Base, former Thule Air Base, or to the northeast National Forest, you're talking approximately 2,500 kilometers. And 95% of that is a 2 kilometer deep ice sheet. So it is a solid, I mean, even the ice there is literally prehistoric. So from the first ice age. So we're talking a country that is very rough. All of all of the coast is deep, intensely carved fjords, which takes highly specialized navigation. So when I hear comments like, President Trump saying he doesn't rule out military force to take Greenland, let's be honest. One, if you really paid attention to his comments from the very beginning, not just when he first mentioned this in 2017, 2018, he has this megalomaniacal attitude towards the expansion of the territorial United States, in which he threatened Canada with annexation. But the Greenland component of this really comes from his tech bro funders, Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, all of these people who believe that he's going to do the greatest physical expansion of the United States since the sale of the everything west of the Mississippi in the 1800s. It's actually mind-boggling. But what he really is not saying, and what he hinted at yesterday when he said that it might be something, it's special, it's something we need, something we must have, these are phrases he's used. He's talking about a special operation, which will, because to do an actual invasion of Greenland would take an enormous part of the U.S. amphibious capability. I mean, literally every Marine Corps amphibious tractor, landing craft in the East Coast and West Coast of the United States would have to be mustered for that. That would be such an enormous footprint. I mean, just getting your extreme cold weather system gear, right? Your TAPS gear, right? Which is heavy, level 7 Arctic gear, because this is the Arctic. Um, that would present such an indicator to anyone who's watching that you go, oh yeah, the United States is going to go up there. Then it's 2 weeks or more steaming, right, at high speed to get there. And what are you going to do? Fight the Danish Navy, which has 3 patrol corvettes that does have capability? What are you going to do? Sink them? So the concept of Trump not ruling out military force and his insistence tells me, as an intelligence professional, he's going to try a special operation, and that could be as simple as special forces, mountain warfare teams who are specialized in this kind of gear, or reserve special forces troops from Alaska, the Mountain Warfare Training Center, quietly being brought onto an airliner, a civil airliner, along with other paramilitaries, Department of Homeland Security, SWAT teams. You would need them, right? You would need immigration and customs enforcement officers, because what you intend to do is you land at Nuuk Airport and you seize the airport. You take Air Force combat controllers, right? These are the guys that seize runways for us, and they will take control of the airport and then raise the American flag over it and declare that the capital of Nuuk is the United States. Now that sounds easy. It's the sort of thing that someone who would not care about the impact globally on the United States or even locally, because how are you going to get to these other towns? You could land at Kangalusat. You could land at Ilusiat. You could land at Asiat. You could land at Narsarsuaq, I believe is the name, in the south, right? Narsak, where we had bases in World War II for B-17s and in the Cold War, but there are people there who don't want you there. And out of 57,000 people, there are 30,000 bear hunting rifles. And I'm not joking. Very high caliber hunting rifles. And you don't have enough manpower. Maybe you can bring in 100 guys to take the capital and raise the flag, but that does not mean you own Greenland. It's a mind-boggling. So by saying he doesn't rule out military force, it means he fully intends to use military force. The question is, can you do it? And then you're at war with Denmark, which is a NATO Article 5 issue. If Denmark gets intelligence by sympathetic people in the United States government, and believe me, it doesn't take a deep state. It just takes CIA officers who are professionals who swore their oath to the Constitution to go, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Maybe somebody needs to drop a clandestine message to the government of Denmark. Then you may have a NATO Article 4 situation where a NATO country, Denmark, declares itself in crisis with the United States and calls for a conference meeting of all 32 nations to come in and try to mediate this, like Greece and Turkey did, right? But all it requires, what are you going to do when you land forces in that city? Fight the police? Shoot the soldiers or capture the Danish soldiers at Arctic Command? I'm going to go find these questions out because the Danes are too polite to discuss this. But the average person in Greenland is going to have some very strong opinions about this. And to be quite honest, the U.S. news media, congressional teams have gone there, have U.S. news media goes there. 60 Minutes did a good segment on Greenland a couple of weeks ago. No one will ask the question, what happens if armed force is used to seize this country and you seize the airports? And what does that mean? Air Greenland suddenly becomes a shuttle company for you? I'm not sure that people are thinking this through.
So, could you tell me more about your planned visit to Greenland? You say you're going to go there to try and kind of find out more about how people there feel about the invasion, about a possible invasion, or how they might react?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, because everyone's asked, what do you think about the United States saying that we should annex Greenland and that Greenland will be part of us? And they go, we're going to want to be independent. And we have been here since Leif Erikson landed, down in the south near Narsak forever. Okay, that's an interesting question. What will you do if U.S. forces show up here, flying over, brings an amphibious force here, or a special force seizes Newark Airport, or Elusiad, or Kangalusa, one of these big old major bases. The funny thing about Greenland is it is geographically isolating. So we could fly 10,000 soldiers into Patufic space, but there are some hard realities that you need to understand. It is operated by Danish subcontractors, people who are Inuit subcontractors. The base is resupplied with food and fuel from Canada, another NATO country. So essentially, Canada may not even allow you to fly near their airspace to resupply anything that you do. I'm going to tell you quite honestly, in my entire career as an intelligence professional, this discussion is one of the stupidest I've ever had, and that I've actually had to go and investigate because it is crazy. But someone has decided to weaponize this fantasy of craziness, and the question has to be seen. What will the locals do? Are they willing to fight for their families? Are they willing to fight for their way of life if an armed it's just ridiculous. If an armed force comes into their country? But it's the one question again, no one has asked.
Behind all of Trump's claims, there is this emerging competition that could threaten US security over the wider Arctic, isn't there? I mean, is there a more realistic way? I mean, surely there must be a more realistic way for the US to bolster its security requirements in the Arctic and around Greenland.
Yeah, well, let's just put something on the table, all right? I'm a child of the Cold War. I started as a, baby spy back in the Cold War, and I watched the Soviet Union. We engaged the Soviet Union around the world, and I've seen it from a strategic position, and how their nuclear forces deployed and how they were deployed on land and sea. But that doesn't really exist anymore. The only thing that really exists is what remains of their archaic nuclear arsenal. But we have an entire structure in place. Patufic Space Base, which was known as Thule Air Base back in the Cold War, is that structure. The Danes operate bases. The Canadians operate a chain of remoted systems. Most actual warning systems are space-based, right? To the point where if a command for war or the preparation of war happens, we're going to know hours in advance. Not like in the Cold War where you only knew it when the missile silo doors drew back, they launched, and then they started cresting over the horizon. And then your radar see it. No, 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 no. That's not the way intelligence works. Okay? Believe me, if somebody loses their mind in Russia to launch a strategic attack on the United States, they will be calling us on their mobile phones, or we'll be watching, guys have gun battles on Russian bases because they don't want to die in an atomic war on TikTok. So a lot of lead intelligence there. So when I hear people say, well, this is necessary for our strategic balance, this is necessary for our strategic interest. What is your strategic interest? Is it to go through the UK, Iceland, Denmark Straits, Greenland, Iceland, UK Straits, GUIK Straits, the way it was strategically important in the Cold War to detect submarines? We do that now. We've been doing that forever. The only thing that makes it valuable, and this is where I'm a little confused, it's valuable to Russia. But the president of the United States seems hell-bent on allying with Russia to a greater extent than he does with NATO. So if you're helping your buddy out, the Russians understand the value of minerals and deep sea drilling there. But the only thing that actually makes the Canadian side of that, the Canadian Arctic and the Greenland seas valuable, is if we literally deny climate change and let it melt to the point where that becomes a viable sea lane to where? China? I don't understand it. I mean, Panama Canal, you think that that's going to be a faster route to where? The country that we're embroiled in an enormous war with, a tariff war with, or do you really think you're going to look at it strategically to go to Eastern Russia? So I can't figure out who the strategic threat is here. It makes no sense whatsoever.
And on top of this, is this idea of military action in Greenland really possible without some sort of wider backing from Congress? I mean, you talk about how certain people within the intelligence community might preempt something like this by sharing information with interested parties. I mean, would the US military really go along with this idea of invading a neighbor?
Well, this is the problem. Donald Trump is a lawless president. I mean, he just does open corruption just straight in your face. He has I speak to people, almost every day who know him personally and deeply. And they say he doesn't care what Congress thinks. He has the Presidential War Powers Act that allows him to carry out combat actions within 90 days and to keep, the House and the Senate Intelligence and, Foreign Affairs Committees notified. He doesn't care. And the very fact, look, as an intelligence professional who worked at the National Security Agency, which, and your sister agency, our sister agency, GCHQ, you can tell a lot by how a person speaks, right? We can tell when a person's lying, but we can definitely tell when a person is excited about the prospect of what he's talking about. And Trump is now, it's in his head that there are minerals there is oil there is gold there, and that he's going to take it. This is a robber baron attitude of the late 1800s to where, it's sort of like the Spanish American War. We can just gin up a war and do it ourselves and take what we want. It's mind boggling, but he has it in his head that he is going to be the president that will seize and create a larger United States than any president in American history since Thomas Jefferson. And that is just brings the true question that a true intelligence professional would ask, which is, we all deal with the who, what, when, where, and how. That's the easy stuff, as Rudyard Kipling put it, right? The Queen's Seven Servingmen. But why is always the key intelligence question. And when I've balanced this out, the why comes out to that he's either lost mental capacity to make rational decisions, or there is an economic incentive here that is pushing him to not care about whether he attacks another NATO nation, and by extension leaves NATO to join in this bizarre alliance between his techno bro financiers who all believe he should take Greenland, right? Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, Mark Andreessen, David Sachs, all of these ex-South Africans who believe the United States should expand into a one-nation technet of Canada, Greenland, and the United States. It's mind-boggling, but it's true. And they're running Washington right now. And whoever put this into his head has got it to the point where he is willing to risk it all, because the money for Donald Trump, the money must be astronomical. And the idea, he really believes that he is going to be one of the greatest presidents in American history, flat out rated the worst president in American history. And if he does this, he will be the single most despised president in American history.
Well, you mentioned some of the turmoil back in Washington. All of this is following something of a mini reshuffle in the US State Department as Mike Waltz steps down as National Security Advisor. We spoke somewhat recently about the whole debacle with the signal messaging. Does this solve any of those issues with security and cybersecurity in the Trump team?
No, this is I try to be balanced about these things. If this were me analyzing the government of, no offense, Burundi, but Burundi or Burkina Faso or now Mali, right, where there was a coup d'etat and you have a lieutenant who promotes himself to captain and then kicks out everyone from the country, brings in Russian mercenaries, now decides no one will speak French. By the way, everything I just said is true. And kicks out the U.S. military and cuts their ties to France while wearing French army uniforms. I would call that the chaos cabinet. But it's happening in what was arguably the largest democracy in the world until recently. And what we are seeing is the overtones of mayhem as a operating system. Trump does and says things to keep people off balance. People I know who know him personally and deeply, right? His own family say that this is designed, the chaos is happening in his head, but to him, it's order. And the only thing he's concerned about is his own financial well-being and the adoration that he's getting. And he now has these crazy North Korean Saddam Hussein-like cabinet meetings where everyone goes, "You are the greatest president, Mr. Trump." It literally reminds me of that old Saddam Hussein video of where every person who is in the the meeting with Saddam of their parliament jumps up and they have to shout louder than the next. "Ya Saddam, we love you, Saddam." And then Saddam goes, "This man is a traitor." And his men would grab him and take him out of the room. It literally is almost like a ridiculous Dr. Evil's, sketch from Austin Powers, where everyone's afraid of what the button that's going to drop them into the sharks of the furnace. So every person in the cabinet goes around and praises him. "This is the greatest 100 days we've ever had." Okay, people, I know you have, every once in a while I go on LBC with Ian Collins, and there are some really pro-Trump people in England, and I have to sit there and go, are you crazy? This is one of the worst, most dysfunctional cabinets in history, and Mike Waltz being Peter principled, up fired, whatever you want to call it, to a position Trump hates, which is the ambassador to the United Nations. Trump, there have been very serious talks, it was in Project 2025, of shutting the United Nations and kicking it out of the United States, which, by the way, came from a Tom Clancy book about 30 years ago, Some of All Fears, if I'm not mistaken. And, no, Debt of Honor or something. And they take it seriously. So putting Mike Waltz in that position, you don't have to fire an ex-congressman or an ex-special forces colonel, which is what he was. But you get him out of your way. But you leave a reserve National Guard major in charge of a $1 trillion budget who is now going to fire 20% of all of our flag-ranked officers who literally outrank him by like 6 ranks, except he's considered the favorite child, right? Guy who has his wife in on private, top secret special intelligence meetings. So no, the mayhem continues. Long way of putting it, but it's true. Russia and China are just eating this up. They're having a grand old time.
Well, I wanted to come on to the US-Russia relationship. We've now seen Steve Witkoff's trips to Moscow seemingly curtailed, if not all the way cancelled, as the US threatens to walk away from pushing for this ceasefire from Russia. Do you think we're starting to see the Trump team giving up on this idea of bringing Russia in from the cold? I mean, or Trump maybe starting to realize that, as he put it, he could be being tapped along by Putin in the Kremlin?
No, he's not giving up on that. So this is how you have to read Trump. I mean, I've written 4 New York Times bestsellers about Trump and his relationship to Russia and Russian intelligence, right? Donald Trump is motivated by money. The 4 recruiting tools that you create an asset or an agent from is money, ideology, co-option, coercion, ego, and excitement. But for Donald Trump, money supersedes ideology. You could have all the goods on Donald Trump. He doesn't care so long as money is, that untapped pool of Russian money, which was hundreds of billions of dollars, was his motivating factor for this rapprochement with Moscow, really. And that's why Steve Witkoff, A real estate tycoon became his special envoy. Witkoff has met with Putin 4 times this year. There is no other world leader who has ever met with Putin 4 times. So that tells you a lot about what Witkoff's role is. Now, don't forget, Putin is also as a human intelligence officer. He is a master manipulator. He too is running Steve Witkoff as an asset. And the way Witkoff gushes over Putin, goes on private shopping trips with Dmitriev, his appointed representative, the man is just being bought by Moscow. However, Trump has been outplayed and Witkoff have been outplayed by Volodymyr Zelensky. Because by signing the minerals deal in Ukraine, Trump now believes that he is going to have access to a higher level of money over a longer period of time of real things he can see, right? Hard assets in Ukraine, right? Rare earth minerals and oil and gas, but himself he's sort of like Scrooge McDuck, right? He sees a pile of gold and he wants to swim in it. But if he sees a bigger pile of gold, he will just walk away from that and go to the next one. Sorry for that simplistic way of putting it, but that's how the spy world works. Trump doesn't realize that now he has to protect the asset that he just signed a contract on, which means he has to give Ukraine weapons and equipment because Ukraine is not going to surrender. They are not going to give up Crimea. They are not going to give up Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and half of Kherson. They're not. And they are very good at killing Russians. So by allowing this to play out until some bigger pool of money comes up, I'm looking at you, United Arab Emirates, in your Bitcoin investment of $2 billion. Trump will be fixated on whatever the closest amount of money that comes to him first. And you don't have to believe me. I mean, I speak with Michael Cohen and Lev Parnas weekly, right? Two guys who his top lawyer and his top fixer for Ukraine and Russia, both of whom went to jail for him. And they say that, dangly, sparkly things in front of his eyes. Putin is going to have to do something clever to get Donald Trump, which is the most likeliest thing, is promise him Trump Tower again in Moscow, which he's been dangling since 2012.
So presumably, then there is at least some level of stability that Kiev can draw from this minerals deal. In terms of we've seen the resumption of the US sending some military support to Ukraine. I'm thinking of these Patriot batteries. Kiev can feel happy about the outcome of this minerals deal in the end. Then,
well, I suspect that they are like most of the people that I've met when I served in the Ukrainian army. What I can tell you about Ukrainians are this: they are very heartfelt people. They really feel in their heart what's happening to them. They are very clever people. Okay, they will read you and they'll read back in a way that you will agree with them. And they are insanely adaptive people. They will go through a lot of hardship, but they will maneuver around you 30 ways to Sunday, and you will thank them for the maneuvering. I suspect, but I'll tell you what, they are no longer corrupt. Since the war started, they have paid for everything that's happening in that country in blood. And anyone that thinks they're going to be corrupt and get something out of this, they will turn you in a heartbeat. This is a power play by Zelensky, who now has Trump protecting him, protecting his new asset. But Zelensky also knows Trump may not be able to ratify anything, if the Democrats, if there were 5 brave Republicans who are marginal, who may lose their seat in 2026, and tomorrow they were to caucus with the Democrats, the House of Representatives would go to Democratic control, and every dime to the Trump administration would end. And money would be voted to go back to Ukraine. So you got to play long ball with a guy like Trump. I mean, he's 70, he's 79 years old, going to be pushing 80, insanely overweight. He has an ambitious, vice president. That guy is one patriotic hamburger away from changing the entire balance of the world back to normal.
Well, Malcolm Nance, thank you very much for joining me today on the Trump Report.
Well, it's always a pleasure to come on Times Radio.